This presentation is on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on global business strategies. And this is completed by Andrea Mattoni and Nicholas Harvey. So with just a quick introduction, COVID-19 was declared a pandemic on March 11th of 2020 by WHO, or the World Health Organization. In this presentation and paper, we'll be discussing some of the effects that COVID-19 had on business strategies. Just a couple examples below, and the topics we'll be covering are what is business strategy and how did it affect the businesses with COVID, uncertainty, diversification, costs associated, and how and when did the events take place. So starting off with global business strategy, this is a quote from Watkins in 2017, is, quote, "A business strategy is a set of guided principles that when communicated and adopted in an organization generates a desired pattern of decision making. A strategy is therefore about how people throughout the organization should make decisions and allocate resources in order to accomplish key objectives. A good strategy provides a clear roadmap consisting of a set of guided principles or rules that defines the actions people in the business should take and or not take, and the things they should prioritize and not prioritize to achieve desired goals," end quote. So when we look at the companies that were affected during COVID, we look at how they operate and ensure that they have plans on moving forward with COVID, as well as after COVID. So we've had strains on supply chain and how businesses are operating, and it tends to be difficult, but we have to look at what business strategies did we have globally to have life after COVID. So with uncertainty, there's a clear definition that it's a state of being uncertain or doubt. You have the tendency of having something that's uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen. Doubting something will happen or happen the way you want it to. So a quote from Working Papers is, quote, "Based on the unemployment rate at the time of writing, we expect overall bankruptcies to increase as much of 140% in the current year," end quote. So businesses were constantly trying to figure out a way to navigate this uncertain time. And, no one really knew what was happening or why. COVID was so brand new. We couldn't operate as, a business as usual. So businesses were trying to figure out a way to operate in a time of uncertainty. As you can see with the picture on the right, that the stock market was slightly higher when the COVID-19 pandemic hit than when the market crashed during the real estate bubble in 2008. You can tell here that there were so many issues with the market crashing then in 2008 that we were almost at the same rate than we are now. With this image on the right, you can see the uncertainty when it comes to the economic policy uncertainty. So monthly averages of daily index values, all the way dating back to 1985, you can see it was a pretty constant, couple spikes here and there, but as soon as 2020 hit with COVID, it spiked all the way up to the 200s, which was way higher than the norm. So moving on to the diversification and the business strategy, with a quote here stating which industries and firms will still be able to capture benefits and integration of this fractured global institutional environment. So how will these companies with so many diverse opinions and abilities, how will they immigrate into this newfound business or way of doing business? So with sourcing, companies will diversify their sourcing patterns. So they're not always going to do exactly what they did before. You might, for example, in the medical, you might always order from Henry Schein to get your face masks. And because face masks were so allocated during COVID, you may be looking at places like Amazon or any type of online shopping to get those face masks to be able to operate and remain healthy. So it also comes down to products where they offer more broad product ranges to enhance their footprint. So this could come from anyone in the sense of companies have to offer more in order to get that return and to have a profit, in the sense of being more diverse and changing their business strategy. The cost associated with affecting COVID-19 businesses is the fact that manufacturers around the country are facing production shutdowns. 100%. People are shutting down. Factories are shutting down. People are putting people on layoffs. They're not operating at the capacity they used to. So things are going to skyrocket. Prices are going to skyrocket. Production costs are going to skyrocket. And what you're able to purchase is going to be fairly limited. There's going to be shortages. With an example here of General Motors canceled overtime production at its Texas SUV plant and its Kentucky Corvette plant due to the part shortages. They didn't have the parts being made. Another good example here is with medical fields. People needed the PPE or personal protective equipment in order to help these COVID patients, and the costs of things were so large and so expensive that they weren't able or were having to allocate more money to those PPE requirements than they originally planned. General Motors, for example, isn't going to be a company that orders face masks on a daily basis for their employees, but a hospital might. But now General Motors is grabbing all of that inventory up because they want to be able to stay in operation and, be inside of protocol, but they can't be because these hospitals are also putting forth their need for this PPE to keep their hospitals operational, because they stayed open all the time, being that they were essential to keep these people healthy and alive to their best of their ability. So costs associated with COVID and affecting businesses is their expenses when it came to PPE or staying open, even whatever that meant to be able to stay open, were much higher than they were originally allocated in 2020. So here you're going to see a timeline of the coronavirus. This is brought by the WHO organization, or World Health Organization. It broke it down a little bit to what is important, so to focus on kind of the key events. So in 2019, November, a person in China was first detectable with the coronavirus case. On January 20th of 2020, the first man in the U.S. had the first reportable coronavirus case, and he was 35 years old. On January 30th, the WHO organization declared it a global health emergency. In January 31st, President Trump banned all foreign nationals from entering the United States. February 6th, the first United States death of the coronavirus was reported. March 11th, President Trump bans all travel from 26 European countries. March 11th as well, WHO organization declared the coronavirus a pandemic. In March 13th, the national emergency was declared. March 17th, states ordered for restaurants to be closed to indoor seating in Ohio. March 18th, elective procedures, so procedures not needing medical emergency, were placed on hold until further notice. This was in Ohio as well. March 2020 overall, 10 million people filed for unemployment. April 2nd, worldwide, the amount of coronavirus cases passes 1 million. May 1st, 2020, elective procedures were set to continue in Ohio. May 21st, restaurants were able to be reopened. From April to December, the coronavirus cases continued to climb with limited hope of change. December, the first coronavirus vaccines were administered from Moderna and Pfizer. And then January to March. Overall, with the timeline, you can see how things really affected in the sense of how quick things moved through 2020. 1 minute everything seemed fine, and the next we were being mandated to always have masks on. We couldn't eat at restaurants. You had to social distance. You weren't to be 6 feet apart from someone. So you really had a really big change really, really quickly, and businesses really had to have that overall, what are we going to do? I think it's really important to note here that businesses have disaster plans, have plans for things like this, but it's also the sense of, when will a pandemic really ever happen? And unfortunately enough, it happened in 2020. And this is how we have learned through this timeline that this is how it's happened. You have to take care of your health, really work to help your business allocate where it needs its expenses at, bring in the profit as much as you can. Hopefully your business survives, and hopefully the timeline here starts to trickle off that we have a more quote-unquote normal life again. So in conclusion, a business strategy is a set of guiding principles that when communicated and adopted in an organization generates a desired pattern of decision making. Businesses were scrambling to figure out the best way to navigate this uncertain time. So we weren't able to operate as business as usual, so we had to go into that plan of how are we going to generate business and keep the organization 100%. We talked about how do businesses diversify product lines and sourcing. So how do we pick what we need, and how do we push out what we want to push out to our potential consumers? You want to ensure that what you're doing and what you're pushing out is what people need, as well as how are you sourcing those materials, because now trade might be shut down. You might not be able to get things as easy, or because of coronavirus, that your sourcing is going to be more regionally based. You're not going to be purchasing things from across the seas if you don't have to anymore. So, and then we also talked about what were the actions taken in the timeline as the pandemic worsened. So our life completely changed. I know so many people have lost loved ones or lost their job or have come down with coronavirus as well on their own. And a lot of it is really going to come down to how are we going to make sure that our life can go back to how it was. So these businesses have to find a way and a strategy to adopt and adapt to ensure that they're still pulling a profit in on top of operating effectively, not only due to guidelines that are being set in by the CDC and WHO and, nationally, but also in the sense of operating effectively with resourcing their products, or being diverse with how they present their products or what they're selling or how they're putting it out. So I think it's really important to know that every company is struggling in their own way. We have to adapt the organization and generate the desired pattern overall for the decision making, and it will overall ensure that your business strategy will improve somehow, some way, as you work through it with this coronavirus. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, Andrea, and/or Nicholas Harvey, that helped with the presentation and the paper and all of the resources. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and thank you so much for listening.